Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be going over the Necromancer skill, which is something that I actually learned something new about today, was bone armor. So bone armor is the rather good, but also not really quite as good, but rather good ability that the Necromancer has that allows him to absorb physical damage. And you might be asking, well, what the hell am I talking about? Why is it good but not good? Why is it interesting? Well, it comes down to the fact that it applies in a weird way to explain it as best I can. Let's say, for instance, a monster were to come in and take a swing at my paladin. And the paladin... let's just say, for sake of argument, he has no shield. And I have 50% physical damage reduction. At 1,000 damage, the monster's going to hit me, and it's going to take 50% of the damage away, and he's going to dish out 500 damage to my hit points. All right? So 500 damage now comes in and hits me. With bone armor is calculated before everything. And when I mean everything... I mean everything. It's calculated before your resistances, before your physical damage reduction, before your energy shield, even. In fact, there's nothing in the game that calculates before bone armor does. And this means that physical damage reduction, resistances, things like that, PDR, none of that applies to bone armor. So when a monster attacks you for 1,000 damage, it absorbs into the bone armor at 1,000. Flat. There's no reduction. There's no anything. And since it also takes place before energy shield even, it will also absorb any damage before it comes in contact with the conversion process of converting damage into mana and all that other BS. It also works in combination with everything except for some very specific skills. So you can have bone armor working in tandem with energy shield, cyclone armor, blade shield. These can all be up at the same time as bone armor. However, chilling armor, frozen armor, and shiver armor cannot be active at the same time that bone armor is. And to demonstrate this, I have a fortitude on a Necromancer, and I'm going to show you that once the fortitude effect activates, the bone armor effect disappears. And let me just go ahead and get the chilling armor proc real quick. And as you can see, we clearly have the chilling armor proc. We have the nice little icicles going around our character, and our defense is currently 10,110. However, when we cast our bone armor, notice all our defense goes away. The chilling armor effect and the bone armor effect, as well as shiver armor and frozen armor, are the same. So any bone armor cast will override any shiver armor, frozen armor, or chilling, and any of those armors, the frost armors, will overwrite the bone armor immediately. So if I'm out there in the middle of a group of monsters and the monsters trigger the chilling armor effect on my Necromancer, it will immediately turn off the armor effect and allow me to take physical damage again. Now, a couple interesting things about this particular ability is that it lasts forever. There's no duration, which makes it extremely useful on the Necromancer. So if you cast this ability, you could sit here for eternity, and it will stay on your Necromancer. The only thing that causes the expiry of the ability is for the maximum damage threshold to be reached. So if I go out here into Frigid Highlands, and I let these monsters wail on me, they will eventually cause the bone armor to cease functioning. Once they cause the bone armor to cease functioning, you can clearly see it diminish as they attack because the pieces of the bone armor are essentially removed. And this, of course, eventually causes my death. And you can spam the bone armor as many times as you want. The problem with bone armor is that it only blocks physical damage. So in this particular scenario, I can cast the bone armor as many times as I want to here, but because there is a monster within this field that is dishing out elemental damage, I'm gonna die eventually. But as you can see, I can still keep myself alive for a pretty prolonged period of time just by spamming the bone armor button as many times as I can. And that's only with an 815 damage absorption. Now, I could utilize this to get my body back, for instance. I could cast it, go like this a couple times, see if I could click on my corpse, keep casting it, find the waypoint somewhere in this mess, see if I can kill Eldritch before he kills me. Grab a couple of these potions. Keep casting my bone armor, hoping I stay alive. And eventually make it out. And if that doesn't show you how powerful bone armor is as an ability, I'm not really sure what can. I literally waypointed in naked with this ability, got my body back, and survived an encounter with a booby-trapped waypoint utilizing the bone armor ability. And it's just extremely powerful in that regard. Now, the main problem with bone armor, though, it doesn't really do a lot. So even with level 24 bone armor by itself, it only absorbs about 365 damage. You need the synergies to increase it, so it gets a very nice plus 15 damage absorbed per level from Bone Wall and plus 15 damage absorbed from Bone Prison. And as you increase all of the synergies, you can bring the level of the absorption up to a very nice 1,250. And then with your plus to skills, of course, you can get that up to around 1,280. But it requires a massive investment to get the level of absorption that makes it into the amazing skill that it is. With its relatively low level, like when you're utilizing it with only like 1 point investment, it tends to be more of just like an afterthought. You cast it, you forget about it, you don't really worry about it. Now, there are particular items in the game that will auto-cast this ability for you. The Necromancer runeword Bone, which I actually utilized on a specific Necromancer build. I believe that was my Bow Necromancer. Although I can't really remember what his name was right off the top of my head. It's been a little while since I played him. It was a very interesting idea that I had. It was actually the Bowenmancer. That's right, the Bowenmancer. Ah, yes, the Bowenmancer. How could I forget such a classic character? The Bowenmancer was a character that utilized the bone armor and had a bow. That's why I called him the Bowenmancer, because he fires a bow. And he also utilized the bone armor. And the bone armor will automatically cast bone for you, bone armor, at level 10. It's a 15% chance when struck. And it would also go off your synergies. So if you have Bone Wall and you have Bone Prison as synergies, the absorption level of the level 10 bone armor that's here will be a lot higher than you think. And utilizing it, you can actually get some pretty nice effects. For instance, if I were to go to Frigid Highlands right now with this character, I could potentially stand. Let me pull off her. Okay, she doesn't have a bow. Good. I could potentially stand in the middle of Eldritch, and as long as I manage to get a proc off, the bone armor will continually keep refreshing itself and saving me. It's not going to be every single time, but potentially I can sustain myself by just simply allowing the proc to happen. Now, at 15% chance, as you can see, it's not going to always save my life. But it'll happen often enough that on many occasions when you're out there just, you know, roughing it essentially, and you end up getting bonked by a particular monster, it'll activate and it will do a pretty significant amount of life-saving process. And, you know, when you're running naked to your body, it comes in handy too, because as you can see, it kind of saves my life here as well. Bone, unfortunately, is a little bit of an expensive rune word for early ladder, with 2 runes in it. Late ladder, 2 runes are pretty common. I wouldn't say that 2 runes are very, very expensive late ladder, but early ladder, those runes are going to be pretty sexy for things like your Haas or your Homunculus or any other number of things. You're not really gonna want to spend your runes, your 2 runes that you managed to scrape together early ladder, on a bone. But that level 10 bone armor Windstruck is actually a pretty amazing ability. It's very similar to, if you haven't checked it out, the rain armor for the druid is also very similar. It has a cyclone armor Windstruck. And it's just a massive amount of absorption that you can have on a regular basis. Whenever anything touches you, there's a very good chance that it will spawn. And as long as it is up, it's up. So as you can see right now, despite the fact that it's been depleted by quite a bit, I still have a small percentage of whatever the amount of absorption is. And Mr. Dusty Buns really is interested in me. What's the matter, Dusty Buns? Come here. Come here, little buddy. Come here. I give you some scrooched. How about this? You look at this. There's a scrooched. Now, you can utilize this bone armor on a non-necromancer, but you won't have any of the synergy bonuses. You won't have any of the damage absorption increases, and so it's not going to be anywhere near as good. To give you an idea of what it would look like on a character with no synergies, I don't want to reset this character because I can't remember how I set him up in the first place. Let's take a look at Spreading Plague real quick, and I'll show you what it looks like when you don't have any synergy bonuses in the ability. Your pre-roll reset. We need to take off some of these plus to skill doojanks. So at level 10 with no synergy bonuses, you're looking at an average damage, well, an absorption of 155, which isn't very impressive at all. And as we just found out, it will actually overwrite things like Chilling Armor, so it's not going to be very useful if you plan on using something like Fortitude for the Chilling Armor proc, which you can put on and then take off, by the way. Or if you're a Sorceress, you probably definitely don't want to use this because Chilling Armor, Frozen Armor, and Shiver Armor are your main bread and butter as far as your defensive mechanics. In general, the Bone Armor proc isn't really that useful for a non-necromancer, and it is part of the issue. But if you are a necromancer and you do have these synergy bonuses, it can be an extremely powerful passive damage absorption. But because it's only physical, it's not going to save your life in like a lot of situations. So, you know, when you're fighting gloams, when you're fighting, you know, like magic, you know, the magic damage bone spear snakes or like poison damage monsters, there are so many different elements in the game, obviously, besides physical damage. You know, you've got cold damage, you got fire damage, you got lightning damage, you got magic damage, and all of these damage types are going to break through this bone armor. It's not going to do anything against them. It's really only going to help you against the odd monster that comes at you with physical damage. And usually even the ranged monsters have some type of additional damage besides physical. Like the skeleton archers are usually fire. You know, like even the spear cats and things like that can be spectral hit. And what it really comes down to is that physical alone isn't as attractive as it might seem. The analog to this ability, which is Cyclone Armor, is all element, right? All elemental damage. And in my opinion, Cyclone Armor is immensely more useful than Bone Armor is, because more things in the game have fire, lightning, and fire, lightning, and cold damage than they do physical. And you will more often than not be struck by monsters that have fire, lightning, and cold damage than physical. Because as a Necromancer, you should be hiding behind your army. You're not up front getting beat up by the monsters. So you generally don't get hit by the physical damage monsters unless you're in trouble. And so Bone Armor becomes a safety net ability. And that's really all it is for the Necromancer, unless you're building like specifically like a melee Necromancer, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Is that for the most part, Bone Armor simply becomes a passive ability which prevents your death in the event that the unthinkable happens, right? So in the event that a monster makes it past your army, in the event that you end up in melee combat when you don't want to, if you're teleporting or something and you end up teleporting directly into the middle of a group of monsters, Bone Armor can potentially save your life in those situations. But on the whole, Bone Armor tends to be a lot less useful versus, most monsters than you would think, because most of the time you're hiding behind the group. You're behind your army. You're making sure that you're out of harm's way, which is what good Necromancers do. Good Necromancers are behind their army, making sure that they're safe. Now, in terms of the melee Necromancer, which would be something like a Poison Dagger Necromancer, or maybe like a grief-wielding Necromancer that fires off corpse explosions, in that case, if you are going to be directly in front, if you're going to be in the battle, in that case, a very nice Bone Armor can definitely become a great ally for you, because it's going to absorb the majority of the physical damage for you, and then you only really need to worry about all of the elements. So you make sure you've got good fire, cold, lightning, and poison resistance. And you can, of course, cast it as many times as you want. That's the really cool thing about Bone Armor. If you play around with Bone Armor on a regular basis, what you'll notice is that you can just sit there in a group of physical-only monsters, and you can just spam cast it. So anytime that you're in danger, if you feel like you're in danger and you just want to try and survive an encounter, you can just spam cast the ability as quickly as possible and hope that it keeps you alive. And as you can see, I don't have any defense. I don't have any physical damage reduction. And it wasn't enough to keep me alive because they were causing me to go into a hit recovery state. Now, if I apply that same exact logic to with gear, like if I was a melee Necromancer, I would probably be wearing, fast hit recovery equipment. I'd be having a decent amount of defense. I would put on maybe like a shield that would have a decent block chance and all that stuff. You combine that together with the way that your character works, you can definitely make it into a much better scenario. So let me go ahead and dump some points in real quick so I can show you what that would look like on a character that actually has some stats. And this is with the really crappy one, by the way. So as you can see here, with just a minimal amount of effort here in terms of equipment, you can effectively keep yourself alive just by spam casting it. And this is the crappy version. This is the 275. This is not even the good one. But granted, you're going to run out of mana pretty fast. As you can see, now I have no mana left. So I can either try and run away at this point. Hopefully I've found my exit, survive long enough to teleport, whatever it may be. It's a panic option. It's something that you can do in any situation where you're panicking. The mana cost at 28 with level 18 is pretty high, though. So you're going to need a pretty good amount of mana to do your spam. And obviously you're going to be drinking a lot of potions as well. And what is so interesting about my headset, little sir? Sir. Anyway, I feel like I've prattled on long enough for Bone Armor. I've covered just about every aspect of this ability. And as always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.